Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this talk. Before we get started, I'm just a little bit curious. Who's coming from the Americas? That's like all the continent. No one coming from the US? Okay, who's coming from the Netherlands? Oh, that's nice. The rest of Europe? Middle East? Africa? Asia? Oceania, that's too far away. Polynesia, no? Okay, cool. So during this talk, I'm going to walk you through some of the secrets to build progressive web apps that look and feel like native apps. You may have seen that this is an advanced talk, so I do assume that you know progressive web apps more or less, so this is going to dive in deeper. It's going to be technical, but at the same time, customer-focused. I personally love modern technology, but I'm not here to get you excited about technology pointlessly. I'm here to help you solve customer problems. So my name is Jad Jabran, and I'm a freelance web consultant and progressive web app consultant based here in Amsterdam. I'm also a Google developer expert and a Microsoft MVP. I run PWA workshop, which is a 2-day workshop for companies, and I have an online course on Learn JavaScript Online. You can check out my website, and you can follow me on Twitter. So I'd like to start with an open question. What is a progressive web app? Can somebody help me here? Does anyone know what a progressive web app is? I like how these seats are always empty. Nobody wants me to stare at them for so long. Yeah? So it's hard to find a definition for progressive web apps because it's an umbrella term for all of these modern technologies. But there is one that makes a lot of sense because it puts the customer right in the center. And that is that a progressive web app is any site that uses modern technology to deliver app-like experiences on the web. And I really like this definition because it all comes down to the customer. We don't care what kind of technology exactly you use, if it's Angular, Vue, React. The point of it is to be able to deliver something solid for your customers, something that has an experience that we call native-like or app-like experience. And these experiences will work on desktop, tablet, what do you call this thing? Desktop, laptop, I forgot the laptop, and the phone. And it works on any browsers, it works on any provider. It's really a universal technology. And I'm going to show you an example. Does anybody use Twitter on their phone? The Twitter website on their phone. Yeah, so you've already used the Twitter PWA. I'm going to show you an example. I'm going to show you how it works. I'm firing up Edge, and I'm going to go to twitter.com. I'm already logged in. And I've got Twitter PWA running over here. It's just a mobile website. But because I'm already logged in and I've already interacted with it, the browser is asking me, do you want to add this to your home screen? And I click Add, and now I have an icon on my home screen. Then I can click on this icon, and it's going to run in what we call standalone mode. So we don't see the browser UI anymore. This is just run by the browser engine, but you don't see the browser UI anymore. And it really looks like a native app. And these progressive web apps can and should also work offline. That's the promise behind them. I'm going to show you now an example of Big Bank. That's kind of like a PWA experiment. When I click on it, it's going to work offline, even though I'm going to turn off data and turn on airplane mode. And when I click on it, it could still load my balance. This is not real money, this is staging API. It could still load this because it has already saved everything in the cache. So all of this has become possible because of a certain technology. Does anyone know the name for that? Yes? Service worker, that's correct. Before I tell you what a service worker is, let's take a look at the web without a service worker. And say you have a page, and you have the internet. And when you make a network request, this is going to go all the way to the internet and then come back. Simple enough, but if something goes wrong, then you can't do anything about it. You can't recover from it. So if the network breaks, if something goes wrong, you can't really do anything about it. So that's why a service worker puts us back in control, because it acts like a proxy that sits in between the web page and the internet. And this proxy intercepts every single request that is incoming and outgoing of the web app. And the reason why this is powerful is because we are back in control. So we can handle failures. And a popular example is, if I go to the internet, but there's no internet, so the network request fails, I can redirect that back to the cache, get the data that I want, and show it back to the page. And this is why it's powerful. But again, this whole thing will be focused on customers. So let's try to think about the thought process of our customers. I'm going to take a really specific example. I have a persona, let's say Vanessa. She's discovering Uber's Ludwig. This is an open source project by Ludwig. So she wants to read more about it. So what will she do? She'll fire up a search engine, search for Uber, Ludwig, code-free deep learning. And I mapped her emotions next to the screen. So you can see her emotions while interacting with this experience. So as a start, she's happy. And then she finds an article, exactly what she needs, clicks on it. She's still happy. And then she starts reading. This is ridiculous. So then she gets asked, would you like to get push notifications? This is really, really wrong. And I'll give you an example. This is like going on a Tinder date, the first Tinder date, and then your date will ask you, do you want to marry me? On the first date. That really doesn't make sense, because there's absolutely no context. It's the first time she lands on this website. It's not clear, why would I allow notifications? What kind of notifications? Don't get me wrong, it's great to have the ability to send push notifications on the web, but doing it at the wrong time, everyone will just click no thanks. No thank you forever. And then she clicks deny, and then she gets another pop-up, and this is like mind-blowing. So always think about the customer thought process when they're using your web app. What actions do your users need? And how can you prioritize all of this while delaying everything else until the end? So a better example for this would be to delay the push notifications until the end, saying, do you like what you read? Click here to enable push notifications about upcoming machine learning topics. That would be so much more personal and would make more sense. I like it when I see people nodding. Now, I'm telling you all of this because you can take any website and make it into a PWA. But there's a big, big but here, which is that doesn't really mean your users are going to use it. Because if it doesn't really have the right user experience, nobody's going to use it just because it's a progressive web app. Don't forget that users don't care about the technology. The only thing they care about is the user experience. And I'm going to repeat that over and over again. And that's exactly why I'm going to show you the 8 secrets of native-like PWAs. And secret number 0 is what I like to call PWA readiness. So before you build a PWA, you want to ask yourself a couple of questions. They're quite simple, but at least the baseline, is your website working on mobile? Does your website take forever to load? So you really want to make sure that before you build a PWA, you've got the basics covered. It's responsive on mobile. It works on your users' devices. And I can't know what your users' devices are. You should check it out yourself based on analytics. So check, is my audience using, I don't know, all of them are using iPhones, or all of them are using old Androids, or cheap Androids, or expensive Androids? So ask yourself this question. And if you want to build a successful PWA, then a core component of this is the user experience, which means you really need to have a user experience designer on your team. This is not something you can offload to any developer unless the developer has the UX experience. So truly consider that if you want to build something successful, you want to have a UX designer on your team. And you want to take inspiration from native apps as much as possible. And this is what I'm really going to repeat a lot. You'll see most of the secrets are inspired from native apps. Now on to secret number 1. Who knows what an app shell is? You can raise your hand. I'm not going to ask you to define it in front of everyone. Okay. This is extremely important and at the same time relatively easy to implement. And every time I run PWA workshop, when my attendees build the app shell, they come to me and tell me this already feels like a native app before adding a service worker, before adding the web app manifest. So this is extremely important. Oh. Okay. So to show you what an app shell is, I'm going to fire up the Facebook native app on Android. I'm going to run it and take a look at how it loads. So I'm going to click on it. Did you see the app shell? Did you see the app shell? Sorry?
Top bar, I guess.
The top bar. So it was showing that the app shell showed up very quickly. I'm going to run it again, but this time I'm going to slow it down and I'm going to pause when we reach the app shell. So this is slowed down. And if I click on the Facebook icon, this is the app shell. So what is the app shell? This is like a moment before the data loads. The app shell is the container or the blueprint or the shell of your application, but with no data. Yes?
Is it like an activity in Android development?
The question is it like an activity in Android development? And the answer is, I have no idea what an activity in Android is. I mean, I've heard the term, but I'm not sure. So it's just a moment before you get all the data. So you can argue there's a bit of data here, which is my profile picture, but this is cached locally, this is saved locally. So the app shell has no data, and it's a moment before you receive all the data. When you receive the data, you just put those data in the app shell. So the first story will show up here, second story here, and the post will show up here. But this is not a Facebook thing. It's everywhere on native iOS and Android. So if you take a look at this is Inbox, this is Twitter, the native apps. Even the camera app has an app shell. This was mind-blowing for me and really hard to take a picture of it because the camera loads super fast. But this is a moment before the camera actually loads. It's just a black screen with the buttons and the last picture. So this is a pattern we took from native apps, and a lot of PWAs have implemented. So these two now are PWAs. And this is the Twitter PWA on mobile. And this is Flipkart. Does anyone know Flipkart? Yes, what is it?
It's a
shopping app. It's a leading, I think, e-commerce app in India. Yeah. And they were like more or less the first one to publish a PWA and get like big recognition for it. So the app shell pattern is an inspiration we got from native apps. And the reason behind it is because users don't like to see white screen or blank screens. And I'll prove you this in a video in a few slides. If you show the user a blank screen for 4 seconds or 3 seconds, they will think that this website is not working or the internet is down. And this is why you want to paint something on the screen as fast as possible. So we often try to show the app shell in less than 300 milliseconds. And this is more or less a user experience technique called perceived performance, because you're making your website look faster, although it doesn't necessarily have to be faster, but it looks faster to the user. Now, how do you implement the app shell in your code? This is relatively easy and might be scary to some of you, because I'm going to tell you to inline the app shell CSS, HTML, and JavaScript in your HTML page. This is the generic recommendation. If you're using Webpack or Parcel or a framework, you can adapt it to it, or you can ask me about it after the talk. So you literally take the app shell CSS, HTML, and JavaScript, and you inline it in the HTML. This may sound scary because inlining is often considered a bad practice, but technically speaking, inlining means giving full priority. And that's what we want to do here. We want to give full priority to the app shell, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So, of course, for this to make sense, you have to have a limit. You cannot inline all of your app, because then all of your app will become slow. And this limit could depend on multiple things. I personally go with I want my app shell to load in less than 1 second on fast 3G. And with this data over here, like the speed and the latency, you can come up with a number, and that's 50 kilobytes. So all of my app shell, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript has to be less than 50 kilobytes. And that will make sure that even on fast 3G, your app shell loads in less than a second. Now, here's where I hope to convince you that the app shell is really worth it. On the left, you're going to see a normal website, a regular website, loading, and on the right, a website with an optimized app shell. They're both loading the first time ever. So cache is empty, there's no service worker, there's nothing local. And they're being loaded on slow 3G, which is super slow. Are you ready? On the count of 3, take a look at the screen. 1, 2, and then 3. So they both started loading. And which one looks stuck? So did anybody notice something? Like, we know that the first one painted first and finished the app shell first on the right, but did you notice something wrong about the one on the left? I can't hear you.
The bottom is showing waiting or something.
The bottom is showing?
Waiting. Something is waiting or processing.
Yeah, true. This is like the browser UI saying it's loading. But did you notice something else? Somebody, yeah, please? I'm sorry? The background is white? Oh yeah, it was literally a white screen. Now, let me show you what I wanted. Yeah, do you want to give it a try?
I think the images were temporarily not well placed.
Yes, so there were content jumping around. And when you have content jumping around, this is like immediately going to look like a poor web experience. So I'm going to play it again on a count of 3. Take a look at the left after the one on the right loads, and you're going to see kind of an app shell, but then it jumps around, and then the font's load, and it looks like a mess. So 1, 2, 3. So app shell, more or less, then jumps around and images arrive. You really want to avoid all of this jumping. I'm not going to wait for it to load, so next. The second secret, it builds on top of the first one with index 0, because we had secret number 0, which is delivering an advanced app shell. So a lot of PWAs build an app shell, but they stop over there. And you don't have to do that. You can actually take it a step further and deliver an advanced app shell. I'll show you exactly what I mean in a few slides. Again, this is a direct inspiration from native apps, and implementing an advanced app shell can greatly improve the navigation user experience of your web app. So it becomes clear where can I find the stuff that I need and in which part of the app I am in. So the first example is this. This is a screencast from like a few months ago. I took it from a Dutch bank account in the Netherlands. And if I click on events, you're going to see it slide to the events. So I'm going to play it. The page is going to slide to events. This is a native app. And this sliding transition and having the tab bar makes it clear for me that like the hierarchy between all of these pages, and that I can go to cards, to QR, they're all on the tab bar. But not only that, if you go to the events and click on, say, Albertine, it's going to open a modal on top of it, like a full page pop-up. So a modal, it's going to show me the details of it. This transition makes it clear to the user that this screen, this modal, is details of the previous screen. And if you want to go back to it, you click on back. This may sound simple. Why am I talking about something that we use a lot in native apps? It's because you rarely see that in a web app. But this is a core thing when building native apps, and we should implement it in PWAs. A third example is Airbnb, which combines both again. So you have the tab bar for all of these. So trips, inbox, and you also have the messages. And if you click on a message, it opens horizontally, but it opens on top of it to show you that this is like a details of the previous screen. So do you think we can build such thing on the web? Yeah? If not, then I'll have to leave. So this is an experiment I built to replicate almost exactly the previous example. So this is a PWA, it's a website. And look, if I click on events, it's going to slide. And if you click on Norwegian, it's going to open up a pop-up. So all of this is possible, but you rarely see this on the web. And this is the reason why we don't really have native-like experiences on the web. If you have specific questions on how to implement this, you can ask me after the talk. But I personally did not find anything like particularly specific about this or challenging. And this is really exciting. Who knows about CSS Scroll Snap? All right, that's good, actually. It means that you're all enjoying my talk, more or less. This is really exciting because you can even take it a step further with CSS Scroll Snap, which recently became possible on all browsers. So with only 2 properties, you can make a kind of navigation user experience on the web possible. And what is better than a live demo? Do you see my screen? Yeah. OK. I have a page over here. I'm going to right-click, inspect to open DevTools. OK, and because we're building something for mobile, I'm going to toggle the device toolbar. You can choose any phone, fit to window, and yeah. Do you all see everything? Yeah, OK. So let me show you what I've got. I've got an element with ID screens, and then 3 screens inside of it. OK, so screen flights. Then if I scroll, screen rewards, and then screen settings. I'm just going to temporarily disable the display flex on the screens, and now we will just have like 3 pages under each other. So just to show you that this is a screens element, like a container that has 3 screens, and every screen has a width or a flex basis here of 100 VW, so 100% the screen width, viewport width. If I make this 33 VW, you see all 3 pages on the same one. But this doesn't make sense. I just want to show you how it's built. Now, so if I scroll, I have rewards. Now, how awesome would it be that if I scroll to the rewards, I land on the rewards page? It already works, but what if I stop in between? So we needed to snap to the next page or the previous page based on a certain algorithm, and that's something you find very, very often on native apps. Well, you can do that in just 2 lines of code. How awesome is that? How do you do that? You just go to the parent container, and you have to define a scroll snap type on the x-axis, so x, and mandatory, which means no matter where the person releases their finger, you have to snap somewhere. That's the first line. And then the second line, you have to add it on every single screen. So in our case, on the screen class. And you simply add a scroll, snap, align, and then start. This could be start, center, end. And in this example, no matter what I enter, it's going to be the same, because every screen has 100% of the screen width. So it's not going to matter. And now take a look. You have to look at me a little. I don't know how it's going to work. So take a look at the screen first, and I'll tell you when I release, and then take a look at my fingers. So I'm going to scroll, and then I'm going to release. It snaps back to the flights because I didn't scroll enough. Now if I scroll even more and then release, it goes to the next page. Okay, let's do one more. Scroll, release, goes back to rewards. Scroll, release, goes back to settings. And let me see if I can show you this here. Yeah, no. Yeah, you can also drag and release, but I can't really show you how it works here. So this is really nice. What do you think about it? Raise your hand in appreciation. Oh, that's nice. Okay. And I do want to be honest with you. There are a couple of downsides depending on what you want to do. One of the downsides I've noticed is that if you take a look at the page title here, you need some JavaScript to update that. And you would think there is a snap event, but there isn't at the moment. I don't think there are plans to add it. I really hope it gets added in the future. But you could still more or less implement it somehow. And I want to show you how I did that. But in terms of flexibility, it's quite flexible. Like you can do a lot of scenarios. The only limitation I found is when it comes to handling stuff with JavaScript and CSS Scroll Snap. So the only bits of JavaScript that I needed, or maybe first I show you an app shell. It's literally just a regular HTML file. It's Air Antarctica. It's probably the only airline name I can use without getting sued. And you have the app shell CSS over here. Okay, it looks like a lot of code, but once you minify it, all of this will be 15 kilobytes at most. And then you have the app shell HTML, which is all the screens. And the only script that I needed was to listen on the scroll event of the screens, which is kind of scary. Listening on scroll is not very performant. So this is why I had to debounce it. So I wrapped it in a debounce method, which then, with a 60 milliseconds timeout, which means in every 60 milliseconds, you will call it at most once, rather than hammering the function and calling it several times. And then I take a look at the scroll left. So how many pixels did I scroll? Divide that by the window width, and then you get a number when you round it. And this number will either be 0 for flights, 1 for rewards, and then 2 for settings. And this is a kind of an app shell that's viable. You could use it, and it's, I think, 10 kilobytes, if not just 15. The only thing missing, in my opinion, is having a dot over here, 3 dots, and one of them active to show you that you can actually go through different pages. Now, an important thing when it comes to JavaScript in the app shell is that you have to inline the JavaScript as well. So don't forget about the JavaScript. And I'm telling you this because this is often forgotten about, and I'll show you an example. And make sure to remain under the app shell limit, which is, for example, 50 kilobytes. Does anybody know the IND? Yes? Everyone like me who moved to this country. It's the Dutch immigration website. And take a look at it. I'm going to load it. Then you see the app shell, which is quite nice. And then you click on the menu bar. You hammer it with clicks, but it doesn't work. Why does it not work? Because the JavaScript for it is not prioritized. So you have to prioritize this piece of JavaScript because it's part of the app shell, and users will see it, which means they will click on it. But most likely over here, we're waiting for the DOM ready event, DOM content loaded, until we add the event listener. Now, secret number 3 is about using modern font strategy. Who thinks web fonts are fast? Perfect. So web fonts are pretty slow. Like, no matter what you do, they are going to be slow. You can use a CDN, you can try to cache them, you can, I don't know, they're really, really slow. And they have a different loading experience compared to native apps. And I'll show you a slide video what I mean by that. And then there's the new font swapping with font display, but still swapping fonts is not ideal, especially for the app shell. And take a look at this example. This is slowed down a lot, so you can see it. So you see fonts, and then others appear, and then they change, which is really not an ideal experience for something that looks native-like. So I'd like to propose 2 things that you can use that make this much easier. And that's device fonts or system fonts. Has anybody used device fonts, system fonts? Yes? Good experience with it?
Yes, with native apps.
With?
Native apps.
With native apps. Okay, that's good to hear. It's like a testimonial for the talk. So this is the same web page open on iOS and on Android. On iOS, you see San Francisco. On Android, you see Roboto. These are the font family names. There's 2 advantages of these. Can somebody name the first one, like one of these? The advantages? Yes? I'm sorry?
It's in memory already.
Yes, it's already on the user's device. We're not loading anything from the internet to load this font. So you can show it instantly. For the app shell, you can show this font instantly because it's always on your user's device. And the second benefit of this is that users on iOS are used to San Francisco, whereas users on Android are used to Roboto. As a Windows user, what are you used to? Do you know the font name? Sorry? I think it's Sego UI, but I'm not really sure. So the nice thing about it is that you serve a certain font for every single user based on their platform. You don't have to load anything from the internet, and users are already used to it. Whereas it's more or less weird to serve Roboto for users on iOS. And the question is there a nice and easy way to use system fonts? The answer is not yet. You could use it, but you have to provide a fallback to it. So you just use system UI as a font name, and that's going to use the device or system font on the computer, on the device. But browser support for it isn't that good, and actually a few weeks ago or a few months ago, this was really bad. So it's catching up, which is great. But you could still use it, and if you want to take a picture, it's probably off the next slide, even though you'll be getting the slides afterwards. It's a font family of system UI. This is future-proof. And you have to provide all of these nice and ugly fallbacks. So how does this work? You're asking the browser, try to use system UI. If the browser goes like, huh, what is this? It skips it and goes to the next one. Apple system, I don't have this one. Next. And then if you're on Windows, you ask it for Sego UI afterwards, like, oh yeah, I have this font, here you go. And then it uses Sego UI. That works because most people don't mess up their fonts. Like, we normally don't install fonts. It's only designers who do that. And I don't mean it negatively. But so that's why if a user is on Windows, they will 99% have Sego UI. If they are on Android, they will have Roboto. So device fonts are ideal for app shells because they load instantly. And they also are familiar to users. And if you still want to use web fonts, you can do that because you can use device fonts for the app shell, for buttons, so for everything that has to do with the system component of your app, like with the navigation. And then you use web fonts for the content. You can do that if you want. But there's even something more modern, and that's variable fonts. So again, raise your hands if you heard about it. Cool, awesome. So all of these variations of the letter G and all the other letters can now be represented in a single font file. So normally, you know that if you wanted to use font weight 300, you had to load the 300 font file. 500, you had to load another file, 500. And that's why we're always limited to 2 or 3 fonts. But even having 3 fonts is quite slow. So you can have a single font file that stores all of these design variations, which I think is awesome. You're probably saying like, yeah, this probably doesn't work on any browser, but browser support is really good. I'll show you later on. So as an example, you can have any font weight you want from 1 to 999. So you can literally have font weight 5, 6, 7, and that's going to work. If you have a designer on your team, they will love it. They will appreciate it so much. And a font stretch, I never really use this, but I think font stretch is when you stretch it, and font style is when you give it an oblique angle. You can give any angle you want. So as an example, if you had to load, this is exaggerated, but 18 files, 18 web font files that loaded 280 kilobytes, you can now merge them, if the font file supports it, in one file that is only 85 kilobytes. Of course, we need a demo, because this is highly theoretical. So I'm going to go to Access Praxis, and yeah, this is the font. So if you're just wondering, you can't make any font file a variable font. You have to look for specific variable fonts. And you can do that on v-fonts.com. There are fonts alongside their licenses. But let me show you how it works. So this is a certain text, and I can change the weight to any value I want. And all of this is just using one font file. And that's great. So let's try 500. I can barely see. Yeah, this is 500. And if I do 555, yeah, you see the difference? And I'll show you another example as well. You can also activate specific features of a specific font. For example, this one has a feature called 0, which strikes the 0 if you enable it. So if I enable this feature, now the 0 over here is striked. And I think this is dependent on every single font. I haven't used this one in production, but I did use something that I'm going to show you right now. So that was the first demo. The other demo is a Learn JavaScript Online. This is the course that I run online. And I did use variable fonts with it. So I'm going to open the DevTools again and hard reload. So empty cache and hard reload. Okay, let's go to the network tab. And if you look at, we only got 9 requests. Enter UI. This is the font file that I'm using. It's a variable font. And let me show you how big it is. It's only 38 kilobytes, not gzipped. I'm not one of those that cheats by telling you this is gzipped, minified, and cut in half. But this is 38 kilobytes. And also when you gzip it, it's 20 kilobytes, which is really, really small. And now if I go and select this title over here, I think by default it's a 700. Let's see. So font weight 700. Yeah, it doesn't change. If I give it 100, that's 100. If I give it 900, that's a 900. Now if I give it, say, a 600, 1, and I'm going to press up on my keyboard, you're going to see it go bigger step by step, but barely. You'll barely see a difference. Do you see it, actually? Yeah. And that's, I think, quite nice to have. Okay. When I do it step by step, you barely see the difference, but if you go from 900 to 750, then you see it quickly. So if you want to use variable fonts, you want to go to v-fonts.com, and then you want to follow the guide that's linked here. You will have the slides later on, so you can go to it. Now, this is browser support. It's quite good. You can use it almost everywhere. But even if you have to support a certain device that doesn't use it, you can already use variable fonts and then fall back to another font. Or maybe you could use variable fonts, but then fall back to the device fonts, which I did over here. So if with add supports not, if there's no support for this, which detects variable fonts, then you fall back to font family, system UI, and all the other fallbacks. Appreciation for variable fonts? Cool. Now, secret number 4 is very easy to implement, and it's very small, like very quick. And it's about disabling selection for UI components. And this is something you get automatically in native apps to the point that all users have taken for granted. So let me show you. It requires minimal effort, but you want to disable selection for UI or system components in your app, so buttons, tab bar, nav bar, and you want to keep the selection for content. You should never disable selection for content. So here's what I mean. The same PWA, I should be able to select the amount of money I have, the content, like some of the content of the app. You should always keep the selection, and that's going to be there by default. By default, you can select everything. But it's really weird if I'm able to accidentally select the text of a button. Does that make sense? So you really want to disable the selection for all the UI components, for buttons, so for accounts, payments, cards. And it's not like users will always try to do that on every app, but a lot of times you're selecting some text and you expand it by accident, and then you've selected all the app and it looks really weird. So how do you do that? This is super easy. It's just a user select none. But unfortunately, this is one of the few CSS properties that you still need to provide the prefixes for it. So I've added most of them here. All right, now, has anybody added a PWA to their home screen? Okay, that's nice. I'm going to show you in this secret how to increase the conversion of add to home screen. So how you can drive more people to add a PWA to your home screen. And I'm doing that because we have so many pop-ups on the web, and you really don't want to have a fourth pop-up saying add us to your home screen. Like install the app, agree to cookies, accept push notifications, and add the PWA to the home screen. That's already too much. So just as a refresher, why does this work? Because of the web app manifest. you add a manifest.json file that I'm going to show you in the next slide, and you link to it with a link rel manifest, and you link to that file. To get better browser support, especially for iOS, I'd recommend you use Real Fav Icon Generator, because over there you can customize the icon for iOS, because iOS icons are not the same as Android with regards to transparency, I think. Here's how a manifest looks like. You provide the name and the short name. The name is in the splash screen. The short name is on the home screen. You provide a set of icons. Display standalone is what hides the browser UI. And then you can provide the start URL. So what is the first page that's going to open, the background color, and the theme color. So here's an example of how you can add any PWA to the home screen. You just click on the overflow menu, and then add to home screen. I'll repeat it just in case. So one more time, you click on the overflow menu, and then you will have it on the home screen. This is the same experience on Chrome. I think Opera and Samsung Internet display like a specific icon telling you that this is a PWA. And I think Chrome will eventually change into having an icon in the URL bar telling you that this is a PWA, you can click on it. But of course, this is not enough for users. Users never click on the overflow menu and say, oh, I'm going to add this to my home screen. Let's go here. So you can do something called the app install banner, which is extremely powerful. But at the moment, browser support is limited to Chromium browsers. And that's all the browsers running with the Chromium engine. And on Android, that's Chrome, Edge already, and I think Opera. So and Samsung Internet. So on these browsers, you can ask the user to add the app to the home screen. There are some requirements, which is the web app should not be already installed, because then it's spammy. You should have valid service worker, valid web app manifest, and you should be running on HTTPS. And you're only allowed to show this dialog after the user has interacted with your domain. At the time, right now, it's like 30 seconds. So you have to interact with the website for at least 30 seconds. And the kind of, I'll show you the next slide and the kind of experience you get. So now I want to show you how you can increase conversion for add to home screen, because you really don't want to interrupt the user flow. Imagine if a user is buying something from your website, and then they're entering their credit card details, and you go, hey, add us to your home screen. That's going to decrease your sales. You really don't want to do it in the beginning. You want to delay it until the user is engaged. So I will show you how it looks like. This is a PWA I've built for my online course. So when you learn on the web version, you go on the PWA and answer flashcards based on what you've learned. So I'm in the browser now, and I'm going to click Start Flashcards or Recap Flashcards. It's going to ask me 10 questions. It will go fast because the point is not the questions. So Recap Flashcards, and I answer some of these questions. So answer, and I get most of them wrong. And then imagine this is a user first time using this app. By the time they reach the 10th question, they've already made up their mind if they like the app or not, and they now understand what it is. This is exactly why at the end of this, I tell them, hey, how about you practice every day and you add this to your home screen? And now I can show this custom button here, add to home screen. And what is the app install banner? It's the thing that's going to show up after I click on it, which is this thing. This is the app install banner. If you click add, now you'll have the PWA on your home screen. So the point of this is that you really want to delay it until after the user has engaged. I've seen conversion rates as high as 55% on my PWA, because I'm always asking users after they are engaged. So at the time where they understand what this is. Has anybody implemented this before? Yeah, cool. So I will show you the code for it. You have to listen on an event called before install prompt. And the requirements for this event, I've already told you about them. 30 seconds of interactivity, valid service worker, web app manifest, etc. And when this event fires, you will get an event variable, which you need to stash. You need to save it in a variable so that you could use it later on. This is why I've defined the deferred prompt outside of it, so that I could use it later on. And then afterwards, on this deferred prompt, you can call a method called prompt. So this prompt method will show this dialog. And I have a button.addEventListener. This is the add to home screen button. So when the user clicks on add to home screen, then you call the prompt method, and then you will have a user choice promise that you can resolve, and you will have the result.outcome. The outcome will be, I think, either dismissed or accepted. And I really recommend you send this to your analytics so that you can understand the behavior of your users. And that's pretty much it for the app install banner. And who knows about desktop PWAs? This is going to be quite big this year or next year, I think. I think Edge was the first to run these on Windows, that you can go to any PWA and add it as a desktop PWA. Chrome also has support now on Windows, Linux, and Mac. If you're on Mac, then make sure you're on 73, which was released like a few weeks ago. So I will show you a demo. Let's do calendar. Yeah, this is not the Google Calendar. This is a PWA I built that looks deceptively the same. And you're probably impressed and think it's a nice app, but that's the only thing it does. You can't go to other days. So I'm going to right-click and install calendar. And by the way, you can do the same add to home screen. I'll try to show you. How much time do we have? 30 minutes. And how many secrets do I have? Yeah, OK. So I will go over here and install calendar. Do you want to install this? This is the app install banner. And then install it. And now I have the, which I can't find, the calendar. One of these two. So I'm going to delete both of them and start over. Install. Yeah. Open calendar. I don't know how it still works, even though I uninstalled it. And now this is a PWA. But you're going to love this. Look. So if I Command Tab, do you see it? It's not Chrome. This is calendar, the PWA. Not only that, if I go to the dock and right-click, I can keep in dock. So it really behaves like an app. And I'm personally trying to transition to Spotify as a PWA, just to experiment with it. I did that a few days ago. And what other examples can I show you? Yeah, so I think I can open it like this, calendar app. And if I now go again to it, so you will find it over here, open in calendar. Appreciation. There was one demo I wanted to show you, which was maybe Spotify. Yeah, so this is the Spotify app. So the native app, which is probably wrapped in Electron, and this is the one that I installed from Chrome. Can you see a difference? Actually, you can see the URL, and I think this is really nice because you can still verify it's HTTPS, even though there's no way to install anything, I think, that is not HTTPS, because you need to have a service worker, and service workers need to have HTTPS. You can uninstall it from here, you can copy the URL, and that's basically the same. OK, now let's quit and go. The next secret is about being extremely lazy like Gijs. And so lazy loading features. Does anybody know what lazy loading means? Yes, perfect. So when you install a native app, you download 10, 20, 30, or 50 megabytes. And that's fine because you click on the store, you go to the store, search for something, click install, and you do other things while it installs. And with that, you get all the pages and features, they become available on your device. The only thing that's missing is just the data from the server. But on the web, it's fundamentally different. You can never keep a user waiting for 5 seconds. So that's why you should never bundle all of your features in the same app.javascript. So this limits actually, I'll show you the motivation behind this. If you put all of the features that you have in the same JavaScript file and you always ship it to the users, you're going to break the main thread. That's a trace I took from, I think, CNN.com. And if you go on and with 4 times CPU throttling, so simulating a mobile device, it takes 8 seconds to parse their JavaScript. So you have the CPU waiting for 8 seconds just parsing the JavaScript. So you should never do that. You should break up the scripts so that you can ship them only when they're needed. So you do that using code splitting. So you split code based on features and or routes. I'll show you an example, of course. And you only load them when they're needed. So this lets you keep on adding features without slowing down your website. You can do that with the import and then as a function. So import with a function is a dynamic import, which only gets loaded when the browser reads it. Compared to normal imports, they actually get bundled together, so the size of your app grows. Even though browser support doesn't look good, you can already use it if you're using Webpack, and I think probably Parcel, because Webpack will polyfill it with a tiny polyfill. So here's how it works. It's as simple as importing a file in with the parentheses, and you have to provide the path for it. And that's going to create a bundle file. This works, but I personally don't like it because what is 0.hash? You have to provide a name for it. I really don't know why. It's a bit annoying, but you have to provide a Webpack chunk name so that it understands that this is going to be called help and then dot the bundle name. So this is only for debugging, but make sure you always have a Webpack chunk name. So when you do this kind of import, the browser will load it when this line of code runs. And you can do all sorts of things. So you can load it when a user clicks on something. Or if you're exporting functions or properties from that module, you can even call them. This is how you call the default function, the default import or export, and any other function. So it's really powerful. It lets you load a piece of your code later on, only when you need it. And the best example for that is Uber, which is Uber's PWA. If you take a look at their source code, they have 3 scripts, and combined they are less than 200 kilobytes. But these scripts let you request a ride. And the reason why they do this is because requesting a ride is the most important thing for Uber. This is their core business value. So they prioritize it, and then everything else you can do on Uber is lazy loaded. Literally all of these features are lazy loaded. So do you need to add a promotion? Sure, we'll load the add promotion.js. Is there a surge? Then we load the surge confirmation. And that lets you ship, not slow down your web app because you're only shipping the basic experience and you lazy load other stuff when you need it. I can really tell you this makes a big difference in performance. I've already used it on a couple of websites, and it lets you keep on adding features if you know that you're only importing them when you need them. And the last secret is about implementing smooth updates. So when you add a service worker to your app, to your website, it becomes like an app. It now has versions, more or less. They're not concrete like on the Play Store or other stores. You don't have version 54, but your app becomes version because of the service worker. And this is the the simplified lifecycle of a service worker. First, it gets parsed. Then it goes into installed /waiting. So it's waiting until it activates. And then it becomes activated. And when it becomes activated, this is when it's controlling the page. The reason why we have this waiting or installed is because you cannot run 2 service workers at the same time. If the second one is running, it will stay in waiting. And how do we ship updates on progressive web apps? As an example, let's say this is the active service worker, which, for example, is version 4. Again, we don't really have version numbers, but just to simplify it, let's say we're upgrading our app from V4 to V5. This is the V4 service worker where it's activated and it's controlling the current page. And then if the browser notices that there's a new service worker, then what do we do? What does it do? Service worker V5 will get parsed and installed side by side, but it will stay on waiting. It cannot activate until this one is not running anymore. Or, what do we call? skip waiting, or until you call skip waiting. If you call skip waiting, you're telling it that it's now safe to run, and it's going to skip waiting, so it's going to go from waiting until activated, and then the previous one will not run anymore. So this is the technical explanation behind it, and to do that in code, you have to have some kind of setup, which is first, in your service worker file, so this is why sw.js is a comment, you have to listen to a event called message. And the message event fires whenever you call post message onto the service worker. And we're basically waiting for an event that says skip waiting. And if we tell the service worker to skip waiting, we are calling a function called skip waiting, which allows it to move to the next section. The reason why we have an event is because we need to tell it from the main page that we want to skip waiting right now. So on the main page, I'm using Workbox here because it makes life easier for PWAs. I'm importing Workbox from Workbox window, and I check for browser support for service worker, and then I create a new instance of Workbox and give it the path of my service worker. And then you have to listen. So this is similar to navigator.serviceworker.register. But you also get a method add event listener, which lets you listen to the waiting event. When the waiting event fires, it means there is a new service worker trying to update. So in that case, we call the show refresh UI. This is obviously a custom method. And then the show refresh UI, just to show you an example, is a button where you add an event listener, click. So this is where you show the user there's a new version do you want to update. And then when the user clicks on it, you have to listen for another event called controlling, and then reload the page. And also, you have to tell the service worker, now it's time to skip waiting. It's really hard to simplify this on slides, but you feel free to ask me about this afterwards. Now, the most important thing about this is the user experience of updates. You really want to show something smooth and not obtrusive. And you can do that with pop-ups. Please don't. You can do that with toasts. That's fine. Or I really like the idea of update dot. This is not an official name, but this is, again, an inspiration from native apps. This is how a toast looks like from Inbox. A new version of the app is available. Refresh. And the update dot is actually inspiration from native apps that is the least obtrusive, yet visible. So I'll show you some examples from native apps. This is Chrome browser. When there's a new version, it just changes the color of the overflow menu. And Spotify has something similar. They simply add a blue dot on top of the dropdown. And if you click on it, you'll see update available, restart now. This is the least obtrusive method where you can let the user update without hammering, like annoying the user. And that's exactly what you can do on a PWA. So that's on the PWA implemented over here. We have 1 minute and 50 seconds. So, as to that, I'll be here in the corridor, and I'll be tomorrow at the Meet the Experts if you want to ask me questions. And as a summary, native-like PWAs are a reality. You just have to keep in mind these three things. You really, really want to focus on getting inspiration from native apps, and you should always focus on the user experience, and you should go the extra mile or kilometer. And by that, I mean do more user testing, make users use your app in front of you, see where do they struggle, how can you make that simpler and easier. And thank you so much. You can follow me on Twitter, check out my website, and I'll be here to answer your questions.